Hello and welcome to the Alosant Innovator Series podcast. I'm April Lamont, the CEO of Alosant, and today I'm joined by Kate Pourhassanian, and I'm from Unscripted, and I'm delighted to have you here today, Kate. You and I met at the New Home Trends Institute that John Burns put together last fall. Yes, in Denver. And so I was just really amazed by you and just thought I needed a chance to chat more. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to where you are today?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's such a joy to spend time with you today, April. I think the story of Kate is such an interesting journey because my background is really storied, if you will. I've kind of worn a lot of hats in my journey. My educational background is actually philosophy and religion. I always thought I'd be a professor in that space. I'm secretly a total nerd at heart. I read a lot. I love research, but life, happens. And I think in our world, and our industry specifically, very few people come to the table with that target lens of this is where I want to be and this is where I want to end up. Shortly after school, I got involved with the nonprofit space. I worked with Middle Eastern refugees. I lived in London for a period of time. I'm a Southern California native, so I think that reframe gave me a more global context of what is really happening in this world and a deeper heart connection with people in general and their stories. I also got involved in the personal development space. I am a former board of directors member of the International Enneagram Association. If you're not from those listening are not familiar, the Enneagram is a psychometric that's utilized for personal development and professional development, similar to maybe the Myers-Briggs, if you will, although I'm a little biased. I do think that the Enneagram is the most dynamic tool. But career-wise, like I said, I thought I'd be in that education space, but I actually did hair, cosmetology. I was a colorist. I did hair to get through college. And it became this fun outlet that became a career I had no expectation of. I think I have always been a creative spirit. I love people. So it became a really natural, easy role to fill, but it became a career that had legs I was not looking for. I got into the space of artistry, so platform artistry. I worked for a few brands, but I landed in the world of L'Oreal Professionnel. I spent about 2 decades in that beauty space. I was an artist, platform artist, became the trainer and an educator, eventually a salon owner. And I had the distinct privilege of being exposed to the world, the $1 trillion industry from the international beauty conglomerate of L'Oreal, with very large sales and marketing budgets. And it exposed me to this world through this lens of beauty and trend and change. And it was just a fantastic dynamic experience. The other part that I can't not touch on is I'm very family oriented. I have 2 sisters who are my heartbeat. They are my best friends. And currently they're my business partners. So the journey to get there is actually a really fun story. I was living my life in Southern California, owning a salon, working for L'Oreal Professionnel. And I got a phone call from my sister, Carrie. And if anyone is familiar with Southern California freeway system, I was headed from North Orange County to San Diego. I was stuck on the 5 for a solid 2 hours. And my sister called and asked, can we have a conversation? At that point, she was an owner of a small model merchandising studio based in Denver. She had relocated around 2005, purchased the company at the eve of the Great Recession, which is not a great time in our industry. And she bought a company called HRI Design. And man, that girl is tough. She's resourceful and gritty. And she kind of resurrected that company through diversification. Because as we know, the production space was hitting quite an interesting time. But through the ashes, she rebuilt and she was growing. And she had found herself at a precipice of growth and had the wisdom and insight to know what she didn't know. And the 2 vacancies within her company, one, she was on her, I believe, 7th controller over 8 or 9 years. So her financials were a little chaotic at best, not consistent. That's probably the kindest way to put it. And her sales and marketing lead was relocating. So she had this kind of epiphany. She calls it a divine moment. She was on an airplane and she felt like these are the two things I can't do. I'm a designer. She's an interior designer by trade. And she knew she needed help. And she realized in that moment, I have these people. They're my sisters. So the next thing she did is she reached out to our mother. So my mom, Barbara Schwecke, she's brilliant and beautiful, the classiest woman in any room. She owned an ad agency in LA, in a space where very few women were in leadership. She's the matriarch and the mentor for all three of us. But Carrie sat my mom down and said, "This is what I'm thinking." And my mom said, "As long as you don't ruin Christmas, otherwise you're all grounded." And we all fear our mom enough to know that, we do what Barbara said. So Carrie called me on that long drive and said, "What do you think?" And so that was in 2015. And Casey and I bought into the company in 2016. And since then, HRI Design, that is the name that we originally did business as, that we rebranded in 2020 to Unscripted. 9 years later, we are still ticking. We've grown exponentially. We're in 3 times the market share, and we have 3 times the staffing at this point. So it's very successful, and it's all rooted in our deep love for each other and our industry.
Thank you for sharing that story. One of our themes this year is to talk to people that approach this industry from other consumer centric experiences. We had Tom on with Black Tomato Travel. We've had Sarah Phelps on with, going to space. What does lifestyle look in space? And we have so much to learn from these different perspectives. And that's one reason I was really excited to have this conversation with you. And through our initial conversations, we realized that both Carrie and
Casey, yes.
Casey, that's right. We went to the same high school in Southern
Yes.
California, which is just mind-boggling that the world can be so vast and small at the same time. So
I know.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about customer experience, because that really is that common thread and that focus area. As I learned more about your early career and how it's translated into unscripted interior design, tell us more about how you approach the work.
So I think that is really steeped. I would probably begin with our rebrand, because that really tells the story of our process and the DNA of our company. So we were HRI Design. We rebranded to Unscripted. That journey was definitely supported with the brilliance of Terry Savick of TST Inc. and Hearth Agency. But that process was fraught with research and development. It was a lot of interviewing, not only of our industry peers, key consultants, clients, team members, and there were these key themes that kept coming up of, this is kind of who you're known in the market space, and this is your design perspective. This is how people interpret you, and the language, the nomenclature of unscripted comes from this idea that we want every project to have its own story, to run its own runway, have its own legs. And I think that is steeped into this belief that we love the process, we love our clients, and we want to give dignity and space and honor each project. So internally, a cardinal sin is duplication. We don't duplicate, which, can be a little painful at times. But I think big picture, from a experience standpoint, the two brand distinctives of Unscripted are good humans and good design. So the two things I really, as an owner, as I'm trying to find new talent to work for us, I can't teach those things. I can't teach you how to be a good person. I can't teach you how to have good taste. It's kind of baked into our DNA. And so that perspective is what we bring to each opportunity. I failed to mention that, yes, we're a family company. We have 3 sisters. We have 3 also in 3 design studios internally. So we truly are multidisciplinary. Our heritage, our legacy story is in the model merchandising space, so supporting home builder, production builder space. We have another studio that supports true commercial, so multifamily, high-rise, hospitality, retail, mixed use. And then I would say our craziest venture, which is consumer facing. So that luxury custom home build. So that process looks very different depending on the end user, but the starting point is always, what is the best solution for this opportunity? What story does this project want to tell? And sometimes that means doing the hard thing. Sometimes that means, the thing I always say to my team is there's always a question behind a question. There's always an issue behind an issue. So really paying attention, active listening, and really putting our ego on check and not assuming that we already know. Yes, we come to the table with legacy, history, data, research. We're the quote unquote professional ID consultant at the table, but really we're a support role. We're here to create this beautiful story, message, journey, experience. And the only way we're going to get there is if we start asking good questions and we pay close attention.
One of the things I recall, Kate, you mentioning is, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about what you mean when you say this, we're kind of the anti-trend firm. Yeah, to explain that.
So, it's interesting coming from the larger, so trends mean a lot to me personally, professionally. I used to teach some workshops on trend cycling and for big, high level, big picture, how trends always develop, they begin on a philosophical level. They begin in the space of ideas. So how culture shifts, it's like almost like a collective consciousness conversation. Like, how are we viewing the world? And from these ideas that shift, artisans or the prophets are the storytellers. So you have musicians, poets, artisans, craftsmen. They start to create from this posturing of change and otherness as things progress. Eventually that shifts down market to the big box target space, right? So this comes to mind, that scene in The Devil Wears Prada where the Meryl Streep character is kind of schooling Anne Hathaway on the cerulean blue sweater. And it's this idea that as the world shifts, as our perspective, as our lenses progresses, artisans, curators, craftsmen, they kind of create the fabric of that change. And from that, I think that there's a lot of ideas that come to the table. And it's really interesting because it's always speaking to what's happening at the time. So when you look at like the .com downturn, we saw within the fashion and the interior design space, things became very utilitarian, very useful programmatically. So the uptick of the city tote, it was conventional, easy, functional. So I think from an ID space, everything, the conversation about durability and transition became really important, right? So then in times of a market where things have a little extra, you're going to see a little bit of that recapitulation of the Versailles era, a little bit of ornamentation, a little bit of extra, like the 80s, a little bit of glam, a little much, right? So these trends, they say, cycle every 20 to 30 years. And it's interesting because they revisit, but they always reframe depending on the context of which we're living in. So that's kind of high level trends. Internally as a company, we develop a trend report annually, and it's always begins with that research touch point. And then it's pulled from that. What are we currently working on as a team collectively? What are we seeing? We always pay attention to fashion because that is kind of the storyteller, beginning in Europe and eventually down market. And what is always unique to us year over year, we see this, so say like something maximalism. Maximalism is this really ostentatious, exciting trend that can be chaotic very quickly and overwhelming very quickly. But how could I infuse maximalism into my home? Well, the answer is, do you want it to? And so I think that the idea of the anti-trend is really steeped into this belief that if one loves it, it doesn't ever go out of style.
Right.
So I think that there's something about, now this is speaking specific to homes. COVID is this timestamp that will forever, I'm sure from a data standpoint, communicate so much change, right? There's waves of data, of shifts in how we view the world and how we live. But I think what it did, it was a phenomenal, necessary reset. And as we lived in our homes, we actually thought about, how do we use our space? How do we exist in this space? And so as we thought through these home projects, because we had nothing else to do, we started to personalize things. And in that personalization became these trends, because we're thinking through how we live and how we want our space to feel. And so the anti-trend movement really is steeped into this deep belief that at the end of the day, if you love it, it will always be timeless. It will always be meaningful because it's steeped in you.
Right. Versus
So
something external.
versus something external, or how should it be, right? It's
Right,
always
right.
this kind of shame cycling that happens with trends. Like, what is cool? What is in? What is out? And it's like, even if that's in, if you hate it, why would you live there? That's
Right,
terrible.
right, right.
So I think that's a driver for us for sure.
Let's talk about this philosophy in the context of a couple projects
Yeah.
that you've done. And I love you leave it all at the door when you come into a new project. Anti duplication. It's not
Yeah.
like there's the unscripted library and you're pulling out this board or that board. But
Hmm.
I'm thinking of a couple like the Sedona Retreat Center. I mean,
Yeah.
like, what was your process as you embarked on that project?
So as a team, so that was, it's overseen by our commercial studio. It's a hospitality space. It's actually one of the developers, is a gentleman in Arizona that we've worked with a lot of projects, brilliant man. And he had this, but he typically works in the home builder space. But
Hmm.
it's kind of this, you get brought to these opportunities and here you are. And so you reach out to your key consultants. And so we got brought into the
Nice.
project. And what is interesting about this particular piece of dirt is that the end user, this wellness center, if you will, I mean, began a conversation about wellness as a whole. So I think sometimes on a programmatic level, wellness is seen as usually through the lens of fitness, right? We always go straight to X amount of treadmills and X amount of whatever, right? Or if you're maybe more progressive, you might throw in a yoga studio. Well, when you're talking truly about wellness, I mean, we're talking a $5 trillion industry with, I think, at least a 5% year over year growth trajectory. You look at what is the definition of wellness, like as the Global Wellness Institute defines it, it's a holistic, right? It's not just
Hmm.
a matter of movement, it's also of well-being on a spiritual level, on a physical level, on a mental level. So how do we approach space empathetically? How do we approach space audiophilically? How do sensorially, on a perspective on the circadian rhythm of how we need access to light, how we sleep, how we dream, how we breathe, how our senses are engaged. So I think we started by asking some of those questions and thinking about, how does one sleep? And what are data point? What are the best ways to create a safe, comfortable sleeping experience? How does one move? And that isn't just in fitness, but also access and not just ADA, but how do different people experience ableism as a very real thing? And
Right.
so when you think about a retreat center, just in that language, how does one retreat? How does one decompress? We need a low stimulation. And so that comes from a space of materiality, FF&E, how we experience touch. And I think also really putting our egos at the door and not assuming that we already know. I mean, some of the retreats that are happening are on a spiritual level. So access to, we're talking different types of meditation, different types of movement. We have intimacy retreats that are going to be here. So these are questions that we maybe have never considered before, right? And so I think this ego at the door steeps from this idea that we have to remain curious. How might we use this space? How will someone experience this piece of dirt in all that it can bring? So I think that's really being in a posture of student and paying attention so that we can create solutions, not just based on what we already know, but what could we know and what could we explore together.
That's great. Is that open yet?
No, we just did the first phase actually last week, installed along the waterfront. I think it's 8 little bungalows, and then there's going to
Hmm.
be a whole hospitality boutique hotels aspect, and then there's going to be, well, I mean, it's multiple phases. It's a
Yeah.
very cool piece of dirt. Sedona is also a really interesting world, so I think, again, we work as a company in over 20 states, so having the privilege of learning about the land and the
Yeah.
people there, and how they experience life, and all of those layers, add to that greater story of the design process, for sure.
Another example, maybe just slightly closer to home for
Hmm.
our audience, the Toll Design Center for
Oh,
City
yeah.
Living. Let's talk about that.
So this actually was not for city living. This was for the corporate Toll Brothers flagship when they relocated from Bluebell to Fort Washington. And
Oh, gotcha.
we're one of the key consultants that do the majority of their model merchandising across the country. And man, we love that team. And we have the privilege of working with them in so many different markets. And currently, actually, Doug Yearly brought us into the city living. We're doing a really cool project, um,
Nice.
view of the Hudson in Jersey. Very cool high rise, uh, very cool project that we're really excited about. But the design studio, so when they relocated, they moved their corporate headquarters.
Hmm.
In that building, they also wanted to establish some branding corporate standards for their design studio nationally.
I've been there.
That's Oh, and yes, so you've seen. So we did their previous studio in Bluebell and some of their national programming. So they brought us in to reconsider the Toll Brothers experience, from the design studio lens. And that journey, and so when we talk about the ego check, that journey was, although we had almost 20 years of experience with Toll Brothers as a company, right? So we do have heritage history lens that we can bring to the table, but also saying, let's still stay curious in this process and pay attention to, the brilliant people, Lisa McClelland, Patricia, Denise, the team there that really run what's happening on a flagship and then national level. What are the wins and learns of their experience as their SKUs and their programming shifts? How does the home buyer experience? The Toll journey is very different than other home
Right.
builders. And so I think, how can we support that design journey, that curated hospitality experience if I'm entering this retail, if you will, design journey? And so a lot of questions, a lot of conversations, and then you're dealing with a lot of decision makers at that level. So a lot of presentation, representing, tooling, retweaking, because it needed to be just right.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that we were asked to be a part of that conversation was so humbling and so honoring, but also at the end of the day to see where it started, where those conversations started, and then where it ended up. It's beautiful. And if you haven't had the chance, I'm so glad you've seen it. It's just an amazing experience. And I love that team. And I love that now we've been able to create some standards that can be then reproduced in different contexts in different regions across the country. So it's like multiple touch points. But again, it always begins by asking those key questions of, what does the end user need from this experience? I just read a book the other day, and it was an interior architect was talking about this beautiful question when she explores a space: where does the joy come in? And so I think that thinking about, as I come into this space, if you are a home buyer, and you're buying this home and you're going to have this experience, like, what do you want that to feel like? And so then how can the selections of materiality and trim detail and built-ins and FF&E, all of those layers should support those emotional goals. And so that's the coolest part of what we do every day. So it's a very cool project for sure.
I love that project too, because you have a brand that's, decades and decades and decades
Mm-hmm.
old and established, and yet, the question is, what does it need to be today for
Mm-hmm.
today's consumer, and what they're hoping for and their aspirations, and to your point, to find those moments of joy and to work with a team that is
Hmm.
open to embracing that it's going to evolve over time.
Yeah, and I would say they were really considering. So we have that legacy piece, right? So there's
Yeah,
the storytelling of that,
heritage.
but then there's also this open-handedness with how might we explore something different and room for growth. So I think that's the other thing. When we are a part of the design process, what our end goal, it's not static, right? There always has to be this open-handedness to the end game, because is it going to expand? Is it going to shift? As especially with some of these amenities and some of these,
Yeah.
you highly trafficked retail, we have to think, what is this going to look like in 5 years?
How is it
how
going
are,
to age?
yeah. And who are we going to be as a people in 5 years?
Sure.
So, there's so many layers to that. So there always has to be some room to where is this going, which is it's fun to partner with projects where people ask those same questions too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great segue into where I wanted to go next in terms of where are things going, you know, and not so much through the lens of, trends
Yeah.
as the clickbait,
Yeah.
but really more about where are those key areas that as you approach projects and as you manage your business and your firm, are there some anchor areas that you think, gosh, we need to create space for
Hmm.
these ideas to flourish? They're here, but
Right.
maybe not where they're going to be in a year or two or three. I mean, what are some of those areas that need space in your mind?
Oh gosh. So I think because we're so diversified, if I was to ask this question to all three of my design leads, they would have very different answers, right? Um, but at the end of the day, it's still steeped in that human connection point.
Mm,
I think that, so from a commercial standpoint, a lot of the projects that we currently are involved in are amenities focused. So whether that's in the master plan home builder space,
yeah,
or amenity program for multifamily,
yeah,
it's where do we want to live? How do we want to play? How do we want to work? Right. And goodness, have we not seen such huge shifts, right, in terms of how we experience life in the last 5 years? I think that some of the key things from a programming standpoint for amenities that have really shifted, one, absolutely has to do with wellness, like I just touched on.
yeah.
Um, and two, definitely about work style for sure. Do we need large conference rooms? Do we need spaces? It's so interesting. I think I know for sure. I spoke at IBS in 2019, right before everything went quiet, and I was talking about how the home office is going to be gone. I mean, no one's using home offices anymore. It's just like wasted real estate. Boy, did I eat my words. But I think that it's true because, but look how radical of a shift. And then I would say, even now, how we're viewing home officing again, just 5 years from that shutdown, right? Our space plans were so open and interconnected. And we're like, oh gosh, I see everything all the time. And if anything, right now, we're needing niche found spaces. We're needing quiet disconnection spaces. Again, touching on wellness, I need somewhere to truly unplug. I need places to read my book in the quiet. I don't want to see all the things. So so I think, like, from a programming standpoint, from amenities, we're seeing a lot of shifting in terms of those uses. Um, there's a lot of conversations about dog parks. There's a lot of
Mhm.
conversations about 55 plus, and there's a lot of conversations about little kids, even though less and less people are having children. We have lots of solutions in terms of play and connection. I love the work that some charter homes, and I think some of the team that actually Terry was introducing me to, that are talking about natural play, like just getting in the dirt, grounding, earthing, these natural solutions for children. But one of the things that I don't think we really talk about at all is that middle-age space, the adolescents. What do we do with high schoolers? What do we do with middle schoolers? They're just this disruptive age bracket that we really don't care about at all. And so that's something I hope our industry spends some time thinking about as we program, because they're kind of, I think, the one blind spot that
They're
we have as a
betwixt and
whole.
between.
Yeah, they totally are. And they're just seen as this, nuisance. They just destroy things, And so they're like, oh, these, high schoolers are all over the jungle gym. Well, did you give them a place to go? Did you give them a place to have any amenity programming for them? It's not even a part of the conversation. So I love that there are people that are having conversations about this. I hope more do. I think then parlaying into how we live, floor plan wise, it's I would going to lump my custom and my production model merchandising team in one and say that if we're designing space for 600 square feet or 6,000 square feet, at the end of the day, they're just people, and their base needs are the same. They need places to disconnect. They need places to feel well. They need places, there needs to be a true sense of front of house, back of house. And I use that language very specifically. So even in 600 square feet, there needs to be a back kitchen. There needs to be a storage solution.
Right.
There needs to be a place to put my clutter, because as we know, we're at an epidemic status for mental health, and anxiety is not supported by chaos. So we need places, we need solutions. And sometimes I think when I look at floor plans or even programming at any level, we forget the key question. These are humans. So would you want to live here? Would you want to live in this space? Would you want your children to live in this space? Would you want to function in this space? So I think just really pausing and asking better questions about not just how do we fit all this stuff into this box, but really how am I actually going to experience this space? And so, yeah, I think it's the same whether it's 600 or 6,000, because truly, I mean, right now my team is in the process of a 23,000 square foot home, right? And then I have another team that's doing literally 600 square foot studio, but they're both collectors. So it's, that end user, where are they putting their stuff? Where are they putting their Costco toilet paper? Where are they putting, the back of house space, but also where can they put their electronics? Where can they decompress? Do they have access to light and movement and well-being? How can they have restful sleep and respite, sanctuary? I mean, these things are the same. I mean, yes, it's different budgets, but they're just people. And so I think it's just remaining in that posture of curiosity and how I might experience, so that we can bring better solutions that are more dynamic and real to each project.
That's powerful. That's really great. I can see that in every context that you're doing work in. You know what I'd like to do now, Kate, is talk more about you. There's two questions that I love to hear the perspective on of our guests. The first is around inspiration. You're in a very demanding role. Your firm is called on to inspire people all day long to tell their stories, but you have your own story and you need to be inspired too. Where do you look for that inspiration to feed your soul?
Oh, I love this question. I love this question, April. I think that you're right. I think as a team, I know my team, they're inspired by so much. I'm so honored to be surrounded by such talented and inspiring people every day. As a business owner, as a mother, as a woman, I have to feed my soul, right? So I'm a nerd at heart. I already said, I read a ton, a lot of podcasts for sure. I think that nature is always the great inspirer. She always shows off, right? But the arts. I am a classically trained pianist. Music means a lot to me. I go to a ton of shows. At any chance I can hear live music, I am in. Many genres. I was just at a jamgrass, bluegrass mashup show on Saturday night in Denver. But, when I think about the arts, and I'm going to even put food and hospitality in this space because I love to cook and I love food and I love the whole hospitality experience, good wine. There's nothing like a good meal. all of those things fall kind of flat for me if it's not in direct connection with someone I love or someone I care about. So I'm truly inspired by experiencing the arts, experiencing beauty, whether that's music, visual arts, a film, a meal, with people. I think we are relational beings that need connection. So I am inspired when I see beauty through the lenses of others and having those experiences alongside of other people. I'm the person at every dinner party that asks the awkward questions. Remember, I'm philosophy and religion, so I ask all the questions you're not supposed to ask, but I do because I just love people and I love to learn their stories and how they got to where they got to. And so I love experiencing the arts with others because their perspective is so meaningful and it challenges me and it expands me in ways that I think is necessary because I just want to continue to grow and rise and become. So I think that it's so necessary to have those opportunities and have them in connection to share and experience life together, right?
Absolutely. That's a great perspective, and a lot of things that are can be very inspiring, but inspiring them with someone else and through
Right,
their
April,
lens,
like
by
think
their
about the
eyes.
things, yeah, think about your favorite moments, right? Think about whether it's a sunset or a film or a perfect meal, like, that your company mattered so much in that experience and impacted what you took away from that. So I just think it's so important to surround ourselves and
Yeah.
constantly be in connection with people that expand us for sure.
You bringing up sunsets is making me chuckle because my husband and I benefit from these amazing Montana sunsets
Yeah,
over
you
the mountains.
do.
And we are constantly taking pictures and texting them to our kids, and they're like, yeah, yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it. And it's sort of the artifact of the sunset versus the experience with another person of a sunset
Mm,
that's
yeah,
really, I think, exactly what you're talking about, which is really powerful.
yeah, yeah. Love it.
The other thing I would love to know about you, and I just can't wait for the answer because you've had such a great life experience so far. What advice would you give the 25-year-old Kate today? Knowing what you know and what you've been through, what would
Hmm.
you tell her?
Oh man, I think this question is just so beautiful. Um, I think, you want to share from a space of authenticity and honesty. And I think when I look back at who I was at 25, I thought I was going to live a life that looked a certain way. I was a new wife, a young wife. I was in this space of, am I going back to academia? Is this where I want to be? I think my lenses were a little black and white. I was very, very prescriptive. Like there was a lot of, this is how life ought to be. This is what it should
Mm,
be. This is who I should become. This is what I should pursue. A lot, my husband uses the language, he's a therapist, and he says, you're shooting all over yourself. Because it's a lot of like, and it's true. And I think we come to the table with all these prescriptive ideas. And when I think about who I am now, 2 decades later, I'm asking very different questions because so much of those shoulds I've deconstructed. Because life, right? You have these ideas and then life shows up in ways that beautifully and brutally breaks it down. You experience love and heartache and loss and wins and all the things in between. And I think that the grayness and the uncertainty and the process of life, the messiness, scared me at 25. And now, 2 decades later, I would say that is the best part of life. So my two words that I kind of, I'm a word person. Curiosity and compassion are my drivers. So I would tell Kate at 25 to always stay curious. Stay curious about the world. Stay curious about yourself. Stay curious about those that you love. Always remain in the seat of student because you're never done. You're never arrived. And if you are, you might as well be done with this life anyways. I'm not a big believer in titles and in periods. Like I want to dot dot dot. I want to keep going, keep rising, keep becoming. And in that curiosity, you are going to face things that might be uncomfortable, might be disruptive, might be hard. But if you remain compassionate, you might actually learn from it, because we don't really know all the things and we don't really understand all the battles every person is fighting. But if we stay open-hearted and open-minded, I just think we're going to live such beautiful, more connected and dynamic lives. And that is something I wish I learned sooner. But and also, man, getting older is so much better. Your 20s are just silly because you're just trying to figure out who the heck you are, and you care so darn much about what everybody thinks. Now I'm in a season of life where I just am living from a space of honesty. And I think that's just so much better.
Well, I can tell you, Miss Kate, being a couple of decades ahead of you, it only gets better.
I can't
It
wait.
only gets better. So
I can't
thank you
wait.
so much for being with us today. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, learn more about you, the work you're doing, what motivates you. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you, April. It's such an honor to know you and be known by you, and such a gift to spend time with you. So thank you for this privilege.
This episode of the Alosant Innovator Series is brought to you by DataBridge AI from Alosant. DataBridge AI organizes your siloed system data into actionable customer profiles, providing valuable insights without costly data restructuring or APIs. You can learn more about DataBridge AI at alosant.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alosant Innovator Series. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast, and learn more at alosant.com.